In the music industry, a record label is a brand and a trademark associated with the marketing of music recordings and music videos. Most commonly, a record label is a company that manages selected brands and trademarks, coordinates production, manufacture, distribution, marketing, and promotion, and enforcement of copyright protection of sound recordings and music videos. The record label conducts talent scouting and development of new artists. That's really done through the artist and repertoire department, the A&R department, and maintains contracts with recording artists and their managers. Within the music industry, most recording artists have become increasingly reliant upon record labels to broaden their audience, market their albums, and be both promoted and heard on radio, television, with publicists that assist performers in positive media reports to market their merchandise and make it available via stores and other media outlets. The internet has increasingly been a way that some artists avoid costs and gain new audiences, as well as the use of videos and, in some cases, to sell their products. So when we talk about a major record label versus an independent record label, here are some things you might want to consider. Record labels may be small, localized, and independent, also known as indie. Or they may be part of a large international media group or somewhere in between. The largest 3 record labels are called major labels. There used to be 7, but now there's 3. So it's an interesting dichotomy what's going on. But with streaming income and streaming revenue, labels are making about 45% of that money. The platform itself, depending on what platform is doing the streaming, makes approximately 20%. And then, of course, they've got to pay the taxes. Songwriters make about 10%, and the artists themselves make just a little less than 7%. So if you are representing an artist on your record label, you want to make sure that they're being successful because your artist on your label, their success is your success. And you can see by this chart here that if you sign up multiple artists on your label, your income is going to be significantly higher. So the record labels typically make about 45% of any streaming revenue online, and then they have to pay, the platform, and they pay the taxes, and they pay the mechanical royalties for the mechanical licenses to songwriters and publishers, and they certainly have to pay the record royalties to the recording artists that are on their label. But it's a big chunk of change that goes to the record label. And then when you look at the biggest ones out there, obviously iTunes is the largest, but Bandcamp is very large. Amazon is large, but that's physical, but they're also selling the MP3s too. So those are the 3 largest ones that are out there as far as sharing goes. And then you have to think about who's getting paid and how much in the music industry. Well, when we're looking at the record label, we can see that of all the money that's coming in for them, they're making about 63% of it, where the distributors are making 24%, and the artists themselves are making about 13%. And then within the artist, so that little 13%, these are the people making money out of that. The singer, the lead guitarist, bassist, drummer, producer, lawyer, the managers, all getting money from the artist. And so all of their fees come out of the band fee of the recording. So you can see that a record label makes a big chunk of change compared to the other individuals and collaborators on the projects. And this makes a big difference on why record labels are successful and being bought up. So the big 7, as I just mentioned, are now the big 3 because they were bought up, millions and millions of dollars. And then if we look at various countries in the world and who's buying the music, who's buying the downloads. Obviously, the United States is the #1 consumer. So citizens of the United States are doing more consuming of content than any other country in the world. But did you know that Japan is #2? United Kingdom is #3. Germany is #4, and France is #5. So if you had to pick 5 countries to do your marketing in, wouldn't it make a lot of sense to put it into countries that consume a lot of music? So obviously you're going to be wanting to do the United States, but I would also take a look at Japan, United Kingdom, Germany, and France, and then you can look at other countries to see what they're going to be pulling in, but it's not nearly as high as those 5. Okay, so when we look at the big 3 record labels, Sony, Universal, and WEA. WEA stands for Warner Electric Asylum, okay? And all of these have labels underneath them, sub-labels. The big 3 are major record labels. So Universal, for example, and Sony, which merged with BMG just recently, and Warner Brothers consist of those 3 major labels. Now, a sub-label, this is a label that is part of the larger record company but trades under a different name. So if you look at this chart, for example, Sony has Sony ATV, Epic, RCA, and Columbia. All are a part of Sony Records. Universal has EMI, Def Jam, Interscope, Island, Virgin, Republic, Geffen, Motown, MCA, Capitol. All are under Universal. And then the Warner Music Group includes Sub Pop, Atlantic, Atco, Elektra, Roadrunner, Reprise, Fueled by Raymond, Parlophone, and many, many others. These are just the labels that you might be familiar with and who they're owned by. But do keep in mind that some of these companies, these majors, are also owned by another company. So, for example, Universal is owned by Seagram's, the alcohol company. And Seagram's is owned by another company. There's lots of people involved with all the ownerships of all these. Okay, so what are independent record labels? Well, record companies and music publishers that are not under the control of the big 3 are to be independent or indies, even if they are large corporations with complex structures. So these are things that are independent labels. In the 1990s, as a result of the widespread use of home studios, consumer recording technology, and the internet, independent labels began to become more commonplace. Independent labels are often artist-owned, although not always, with the stated intent often being to control the quality of the artist's output. So some of you who are in this class might be wanting to start a record label because you're an artist, or maybe you're a songwriter or a singer-songwriter, and you're starting your own record label, which is what I would recommend. Forget the majors, launch your own record label. So you can be tied into the big 3, or you can have your own record label. Well, I can tell you this, that as a major 3, the big 3, if you're signed to one of them and you're an unknown artist, chances are, if you get a deal, it will be a 6% deal, which means that the artist receives 6%, the record label receives 94%. And keep this in mind, all of your expenses, all 100% of your expenses come out of the 6%. The record labels are really like banks. They fund it, they help make money with it, and all the expenses are dumped onto the 6% being paid to the artist. Now, as an independent record label, you receive 100%. But just like the majors, 100% of your expenses are also coming out of the artist's pay, if that's the case. Independent labels usually do not enjoy the resources available to the big three, and as such will often lag behind them in market sales. So who are you going to call in Poughkeepsie to get airplay? Who are you going to call in Iowa City to get airplay? The majors, they have offices in these cities, and they have representatives that call on these markets all the time. You as an independent record label don't have that luxury. Often, independent artists manage a return by recording for a much production cost of a typical big label release. You, as an independent record label executive, can get an artist into the studio for much cheaper than the majors will do, and therefore your chances of recouping those funds are increased substantially. You can start making money much quicker than you could as if the artist was signed to a big label release. Sometimes indies are able to recoup their initial advance even with much lower numbers in sales, and that's because their costs are lower, typically. Now, what about vanity record labels? Vanity labels are labels that bear an imprint that gives the impression of an artist's ownership or control, but may in fact represent a standard artist-label relationship. A lot of independent artists release their own product on their independent record label. Those record labels are called vanity record labels. In such an arrangement, the artist may control it all or nothing more than the use of their name on the label, but may enjoy a greater say in the packaging of his or her work. So many times, if it's a larger label that's letting the artist put their name on the record label, saying, oh, it's owned by that so-and-so artist, that may or may not be true. It still may be owned by a large record label. But the perception is that it's run by the artist. There's an artist in Cleveland by the name of Trent Reznor. Trent Reznor is in a band called 9 Inch Nails. Trent owns a record label called Nothing Records, and Nothing Records is distributed by Universal. Now, who owns the record label? Well, it's a vanity record label owned by Trent Reznor, but he has a P&D deal, pressing and distribution deal, with Universal. Many artists earlier in their careers create their own labels, which are later bought out by a bigger company. So when you're forming your record label, you also have to keep in mind that eventually somebody might come to you someday and offer you a nice chunk of change for your record label. If this is the case, it can sometimes give the artist greater freedom than if they were signed directly to a big label. So this is something that the vanity record labels can be beneficial to the artist if they're owning and controlling their own output. As I mentioned about Nothing Records, there are many such examples of this kind of label, such as Nothing Records, owned by Trent Reznor of 9 Inch Nails, and Morning Records, owned by the Cooper Temple Claws, who were both releasing EPs for years before the company was bought out by RCA. Let's talk about record label groups. Record labels are often under the control of a corporate umbrella organization called a music group. A music group is typically owned by an international conglomerate holding company, which often has non-music divisions as well. A music group controls and consists of music publishing companies, record manufacturers, record distributors, and record labels. Lots of different types of companies are involved with the label group. Record companies or manufacturers, distributors, and the record label itself may also comprise a record group, which is in turn controlled by a music group. Okay, so there's differences that's going on with the funding of these. And just keep in mind that a record company typically owns a recording studio. They're a recording company. And a record label is a company that uses somebody else's studio and puts their label on the recording. So there's a record company and a record label, two different things. Some record companies or recording companies have labels under that umbrella, and that they're just called record labels. The constituent companies in a music group or record group are sometimes marketed as being divisions of the group. And now there's also internet labels and digital labels. Now this is where I'm kind of steering this class. I'm hoping that you guys think about starting up a digital record label. You don't need to have a whole bunch of vinyl records or CDs in your garage waiting to be sold. You can start a digital record label and have your music available online for downloads or streams and not have any physical product at all. So keep that in mind. Now, I know a lot of artists are going to say, well, hey, I like to have something available at my merch table for sale, some physical product. Well, I understand that. My suggestion, and this is what I give to my clients, is that once you get a big demand for those, don't go down that road. You can offer a business card with a QR code on it for a download when someone gets back to their home. So you can sell them, or you can give them a business card with a QR code printed on it so that they can download an album or a single or whatever it is that you're selling them or giving them right onto their own Mac or PC. Okay. So anyway, this is a new thing pretty new thing that's happening more and more, and this is where I'm hoping you'll go. Depending on the ideals of the net label, music files from artists may be downloaded free of charge or for a fee that is paid via PayPal or Square or an online payment system of some sort. So if you're interested in starting up your own record label and you go ahead and you file it with the state, you're going to end up with a tax ID number and a bank account, and eventually you're going to be setting up a way to receive payments. Some of these labels also offer hard copy CDs in addition to direct downloads, which is what we were just talking about. You can offer CDs and vinyl as necessary, but keep in mind, price break on a CD at $1.25 per CD is 1,000 copies. Well, 1,000 copies means that it's $1,250 out of the record label executive's pocket, and many of those products will sit in the garage or on the basement floor waiting to be sold. So if that's the case, you might not want to go down that road until you have demand to make that happen for you. And then a lot of net labels acknowledge the Creative Commons licensing system and reserve the certain rights for the artist. Now, Creative Commons, many times it's free. It's a free download, and artists make money because they're hoping that their songs go viral, which may or may not happen. Okay. Digital labels are the latest version of a net label. So we're going to form a digital label. That's what I want you to say to yourself. I'm forming a digital record label. Say it right now if you want. Net labels were started as a free site or just a hobby point. Digital labels seek to give the major labels a real run for their money because these digital labels are infringing and legally infringing on the major record labels. And that's why the music industry has fragmented into multiple niches. is because there's lots of different styles of music out there. And these digital labels are promoting all kinds of music and are able to turn on a dime where a major record label can't necessarily do it that way. So another advantage to forming your own digital record label. And then there's open source labels. This is a new type of phenomena, open source. It's kind of like open coding for computers or open software that can happen with that. All right, so open source basically what I was talking about with open source is where you're offering your code, your digital code, for free. So people can download your music for free and they can do what they want to with it for free. If you're going to do it that way, I would also recommend that you put a little disclaimer on there, making sure that when they download it, they recognize that they don't own it and they can't sell it. That's up to you. And then you have to look at some other issues that are going out there. The publishers are now acting as labels. So in the past 15 years or so, some music publishing companies began undertaking the work traditionally done by record labels. So you may have seen, like books on audio. And so basically what that was a publisher taking a book, having it read, using it for download, or putting it on a CD for sale. And now they've kind of moved into the music of doing the same thing. Let me give you a warning. If you're forming a record label and you also control the publishing of the artists that are on your record label, make sure that you're doing the work of a publisher and not just using that as another income source. If you don't, the singer-songwriter or the songwriter-artist will suffer because you're not really acting like a music publisher and trying to get other uses for the song. And therefore, you're hurting the artist. Your success comes because of your artist's success. If your artists are successful, the labels of success are much greater. But if you're hindering your artist because you're doing the publishing and you're not acting, then you're not going to be helping your record label in the long run. And you're hurting your artist at the same time. So if you're going to be both a record label and a publisher, make sure that you put in the due diligence to both of those. Are there any questions on record label types?